I always wanted to be a storyteller and weave fleeting fancies of fantasy together, from grandiose gestures to subtle subtitles and convenient conjecture. A moment, a pause, a break. A tale with no expectations, just an escape. But life had other intentions, far too many to mention. And now that I stare at the ceiling, trying not to blink, my mind unravels all the things I thought I might think. I can no longer abide the notion of subdued neutralization, in lieu of waking moments that elude realization. The complex quandary of communication, to be understood and fully understand, absent exacerbation. I cannot simply converse to convey the connections of willful blindness to disparity and oppression, racism and bigotry in times of election, accountability and culpability subjected to deferred deflection and dereliction. But I can try. While the hordes of hate and villainy disguise themselves in pity, to the good people, silence is the harbinger of their victory. So I shall be loud and unencumbered, even when the voices of reason are outnumbered. The strafe of ignorance stains our mediocrity. The only solution is joining in the rhetoric in synchronicity. Blow for blow, hit for hit. I cannot just stand by. I have to try.
What's going on in the world?
Welcome back to What's Going On in the World. I'm your host, Tommy J. Hausman, and I am here with no one. Sarah is going to be gone for a couple of years, I believe. So it's going to be just me. I'm back, and I come back at a fortuitous time. The presidential debate 2024 between President Biden and former President Trump happened the other day. To be honest, I came in here yesterday and I tried to sit down and collect my thoughts and figure out what I was going to say, and I just couldn't do it. I had to step away and digest what had just happened, and I'm glad I did, because now I'm a little more calm and I'm a little more thoughtful about what it is that I have to say. So to start off with, the debate didn't go well. It was a horrible debate. Especially for Biden. I mean, he really didn't exude confidence. But let's talk about that for a minute. What does it say about us as people when we admire the person that lies confidently over the person that's telling the truth with a raspy voice? I think therein lies the problem with a lot of things, and that kind of what I want to concentrate on more today, because Trump did nothing but lie. Every single thing he said was a lie. And I'm not going to go over all of them. I think there's plenty of fact-checking going on from various sources. I don't think that it would do me any good to sit here and reiterate those fact checks and point out all the lies. Just know that nothing he said was the truth. But let's talk about just a couple of them. Let's talk about when he said, and I'm sorry if I don't get this exactly right, but I'm pretty sure what he said was after birth abortion. I mean, that's nonsense. Okay. I mean, if he said what they basically do is after 9 months and they have the baby and they set the baby aside and decide what they're going to do with it. So here's the thing. The only reason he would say something like that is to elicit outrage, because that would infuriate somebody if they thought that was real, right? So I come up to you, you trust me, and you think that everything that I'm saying is true, and I tell you that Democrats kill babies after they're born. And they call it after birth abortion. You would think that was horrible, because that is horrible, but that's infanticide. That's not a thing. It's illegal in all 50 states. But something that does happen is that sometimes a baby is born and they're going to die. So what they do have is infant hospice. Just like we have hospice for older people, hospice for people that have cancer, a terminal illness. So what that means is they find a compassionate way to let a human being, be it a baby, a person with a terminal illness, or the elderly, die comfortably. That's what that is. And that we have that for all ages. And then to be so evil, to take that and turn it into after-birth abortion is just horrible. And people should be aware of these grotesque types of lies. So that is why I pointed that one out. And the other one that I wanted to just point out for a minute is that immigration. There's no proof or sign or indication that people are letting massive amounts of criminals out of jail or out of mental hospitals and sending them over the border. The amount of people coming over the border right now is actually lower than it has been in a long time. And I think the reason that Republicans use the border as a hot topic point is because it upsets people so greatly. And it upsets people so greatly is because even if you don't really realize it, you're racist. So a lot of the things that go on in South America that cause people to want to come to our country to live a better life, we caused. And I'm just going to use a couple examples to try to explain this to you. So, for one, where do you think the cartel gets its guns? I'm just going to leave it right there. Where do you think the cartel gets its guns? They don't come out of nowhere. So there's that. Another thing is we as Americans think that we should have avocados whenever we want, no matter if they're in season or not. So a lot of things are going, avocados don't grow here. They don't grow here. So there's a very high demand for avocados, sugar, cocoa from South America, and tons of other things as well. So they are producing all this stuff for us to consume. And people with guns want part of that money. They want part of that money. They want to have control. And I understand that that's a country's problem to deal with the criminals in their country, but the criminals in that country are armed because they got the guns from us. Do you understand? And that's just one issue. I mean, there are American companies in South America that have rights to the water in the area, and there are villages and towns and cities around those areas that don't have access to clean drinking water. And then American companies like Nestle and Coca-Cola are using that water to create drinks like Coke instead of them having access to clean drinking water because the American company owns the rights to it. So these are the things that we have to consider. These are not criminals. These are not villains. These are not evil people trying to do America harm. They just want the opportunity to change their life and live a better life. And if you don't have compassion and empathy for that want and that need, I don't understand you as a person. I don't understand how you could not have compassion for somebody wanting a better life. You are not better than anybody else because you were lucky enough to be born in this country. If you want to be a real American, it has to start with understanding and compassion and empathy. If it doesn't start there, if it starts with violence and hate, you're doing it wrong. All right. So that's kind of enough about how the debate went, because while we've been distracted by this horrible show that we saw on television, the Supreme Court has really gone at it. The Supreme Court has really just let us have it. We're gonna start with I guess the most apathetic situation where the Supreme Court ruled that the states can now make a choice to criminalize people sleeping outdoors or having tents in public areas. So of course, not all cities in town are going to criminalize, that behavior, but some are, especially red states. Red states are going to try to criminalize homelessness. Now, I'm not going to go into how homelessness happens, but I mean, most of you have to understand that most of the time homelessness isn't a choice. People don't choose to be homeless most of the time. So let's have a little empathy and compassion there. The next thing that I want to talk about with the Supreme Court is that they basically legalized politicians' ability to take bribes. I'm going to leave links to all this at the bottom of the podcast, so you can look all this up for yourself. But just think about that for a minute. What incentive do politicians now have not to do things that are bad? Because now they can legally take money from people that are trying to influence them to pass certain laws or vote certain ways. The last thing that I want to talk about is that the Supreme Court has overturned the Chevron doctrine. So the Chevron doctrine gave the FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the ability to look at laws that Congress had passed and fill in the gaps. So basically, the Congress passed a law that said, we should have clean air and businesses shouldn't pollute air. Our air quality should be good, and it should not be bad due to businesses or industry. So the Environmental Protection Agency, its job was to say, okay, well, this is what that means. That means that you cannot release this into the atmosphere, you cannot release this into the water, you cannot release this into the ground, and you cannot put this in our food, you cannot put this, so on and so forth, right? And it's like, okay, this is bad for people, and this doesn't go in, and we're going to apply it to this act that Congress passed. They overturned that. So now there's no protection whatsoever for people. There's protection for businesses. Businesses can now do whatever they want. They can put whatever poison that they want into the air, into the ground, into the water without any repercussion whatsoever. I'm sure all of you don't want to get cancer from a company abusing its power. None of you want that. None of you want to see lead pipes poisoning people, right? These are things that we don't want. Now, let's talk about how we got here. We got here because people vote on hot topic issues like the border and like abortion, and they don't understand that they're voting against their own interest. 2024 is the greatest example of proving to the American people that they're voting against their own interests when they vote for Republicans. Republicans do not have your interest at heart. They always vote down aid for veterans, almost always. I can't say always, but they almost always vote down aid for veterans. They stock the court like we have it now, where we have 6 judges, most of the time 6. Sometimes it's been 5, but most of the time it's 6. That go against precedents, which all of them said that precedents is precedents. That's stated law. That's stated law, and they all said that before Congress, before they were approved. So they all lied in front of Congress, because overturning something that's been around for 40, 50 years, decades, is supposed to be set law. So now we don't have any set law anymore, and the Supreme Court is going to do whatever it is they want to do. And the reason we have a Supreme Court that is putting industry and businesses and people with money over the general public is because Republican voters, or people that don't vote at all, voted for people that didn't have our interest in mind or at heart. They voted for people because they wanted to be pro-choice or pro-life. They wanted to be pro-life. They wanted to be anti-immigration. They wanted to be racist. They wanted to be hate-filled, and they wanted to be violent, instead of having empathy and compassion towards people and not businesses. That is why we are here, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we are here. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm not trying to be too abrupt. I think I'm pretty well-toned right now for how bad of a situation this is. Like I said, I will leave links at the end of the podcast so you can look all this up for yourself. But please take the time to do that. Please take the time to educate yourself on who you're voting for, what they believe in, what they voted for in the past, and what that means for our country. Do not listen to Fox News. Do not listen to Joe Rogan. Listen to common sense. Listen to people. Listen to people. How does this affect people? That should be your North Star when you are going to vote. What does the person that I want to vote for, what are their policies, and how do they affect me and my neighbors? How do they affect people that are different from me? How do they affect people that are oppressed? How do they affect my neighborhood, my city, my state? And if they affect people negatively and cause oppression and cause other people to say vile things about them, if it starts with anger, if it starts with hate, if it starts with this visceral tone of hate, it's wrong. And it's not hard. It's not hard to pick that out when people are talking. It's not hard. So when you hear a bunch of people talking about this is what's good for people, that's not wokeness. Well, I guess it is. It is wokeness, but it's not. Wokeness is not bad. Wokeness is a good thing. To be awake is a good thing, because the opposite of being woke is to be asleep, is to be ignorant, and is to do cruel things to people for no reason. So, I hope that you look through the links that I'm going to share with you this morning. And please educate yourself and share this information with friends. And we have to keep Trump out of office. We have to keep him out of office. If you don't know what Project 2025 is, look it up. The dismantling of the educational system alone is a horrific idea. And if you think it is not a horrific idea, it's probably because you have enough money to pay for an education wherever you want for your children. But you have to stop and think about empathy and compassion. Not everybody has money to send their children wherever they want to go for an education. So if you don't have empathy and compassion, maybe you need to take a step back and think about what you're going to do with your vote. And finally, I want to tell everyone that your vote does indeed matter. Your vote matters so much, especially right now. Everybody thinks their vote doesn't matter because we, as a country, have never stepped up to the plate and actually voted like we should. The highest voting turnout I think we've ever had is around 20%. We are not exercising our right to vote as a country. We are not exercising our right to vote locally, state, or nationally. We have to have our voices heard, and the way that we have our voices heard is to be informed, educated voters. And if you are complaining about how your life is every day and how things are for you, which if you're not now, you're going to be soon. If things don't change, you have got to get involved and vote. You have to vote. Then, if you get your neighbors to vote and everybody around you to vote, you might actually start to see things to change. Not only vote, run for office. Run for office. Be the change. Be the change that you want to see. Take this opportunity, start a podcast, spread the word. Take the opportunity to do something to be the change you want to see. Vote. Do something. The poem that I read at the beginning of this podcast was titled, When Good People Do Nothing. And the last line of the poem is, I have to try. We all have to try. So, thank you for joining me for another episode of What's Going On in the World. I'm your host, Tommy J. Hausman, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.